In this tutorial, we're going to be building a small but real full stack app using Vite React, TypeScript, Bun for the runtime, Prisma for our ORM, and SQLite for our database. Our goals for this tutorial is to understand where Prisma runs, where it doesn't, why we need a backend between React and our database, and then how Prisma generates types from schema, and then how the overall data flows across the system. So the mental model that we want to have before we even start is the following. So the browser cannot access our database directly, which is important. It cannot safely run Prisma, and it cannot access local files. So our structure is going to be very simple. We'll have our browser, which is going to be our React app. It's going to send requests to our Bun server, and then the Bun server is what talks to our Prisma client, the ORM, and then that will talk to the database. Prisma always runs on the server, never in the browser, and that's the first thing most beginners misunderstand. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here in our terminal is we're going to get our project structure set up. So we're going to create a parent folder. We're going to call this, we'll go make directory. We'll call this React Prisma Bun. And then we're going to cd into that. And we're going to make two folders. So the first one that we're going to make is for our front end, and we're going to use Vite to scaffold out our front end. So just in case you never used Vite before, you just go to vite.dev, and this will give you kind of the basics to get started. We'll be using Bun for us, and so we'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, so inside the root of our directory, what we're going to do is we're going to run the following command. We're going to say bun create Vite front end. First thing we're going to do is we're going to select React. We're going to go with TypeScript, say no on the V8 beta, and then we're going to install with Bun now. Boom. That's how quickly it was for us to get our React app up and running. And if you go to that port, 5173, in your browser on localhost, you'll see that we have just a vanilla Vite React application up and running. Okay, so we'll leave that open. What we're going to do is we're open up a new terminal, and in this same folder, we're going to create our backend. So I'm going to just make the backend. We're going to cd into the backend, and then we're going to run bun init. And this is going to be blank. Okay, that's it. That's all we wanted to do from the base. And the reason we're using Bun instead of npm is because Bun gives us a built-in HTTP server. We don't have to worry about Express. It's a pretty modern runtime, and it's extremely fast. So the next thing that we're going to do, and since we're using SQLite for this and not Postgres, we're going to install a different client. And this is going to be Prisma 6. Prisma at 6, right? And then at Prisma client at 6, and we're going to go ahead and add that. Perfect. Then the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to run the initialization for Prisma. We're going to say bunx Prisma init. Perfect. And this basically set up our base setup that we need for this tutorial. At this point, we don't have any tables, there's no database yet, and Prisma is not connected to anything. We just have our kind of base. So now what we're going to do is we're going to jump into VS Code, where we're going to start editing some of our code. Okay, so here we are inside of VS Code. We have our backend and our front end, and they're all in our parent folder called React Prisma Bun. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up the .env, and we're going to go into our .env here. So this .env, the Prisma schema, and the Prisma config is what gets generated when we run the initialization. So we're going to open up the env. We'll go ahead and close that. So what we're going to do first is we're going to replace this entire kind of default Postgres setup. And all we're going to do here is we're going to say file, and we'll call this dev.db. dev.db. That's it. Essentially what this does is it tells Prisma create and use a local SQLite file named dev.db. So you may be asking why we're using SQLite instead of Supabase or Postgres or what have you. SQLite's, it's simple. It's zero setup. There's no running database service, and it's perfect for local first apps. Okay, so moving on, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to open up the schema Prisma. So I'm going to close this file. We're going to come here. We're going to open up schema Prisma. I'm going to go ahead and delete everything. We're going to start with a fresh file. So the first thing we're going to create is our client. So we're going to say generator client. And what we're going to do is we're going to set our provider equal to Prisma client JS. And then right below that, we're going to define our data source. So we're going to say data source DB. And this is going to be the provider SQLite. And then we're going to have our URL. And the URL is going to be env. And we're going to reference the database URL that we set in our environment URL. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to set up our model. So it's going to be very simple. We're going to say model to do, and then we're going to say ID. This is going to be an integer. Then we're going to have title, which is going to be a string. Then we're going to have completed. We'll set that as a Boolean. And then finally, we are going to have created at, and this is going to be a date time. Now we need to do a couple things. So on the ID, we need to make sure that this is auto increment. So we're going to say ID space default, and then we're going to run auto increment. And then we need to do a couple more things. So on the Boolean, we're going to make sure this is a false by default. So we're going to say at default. We'll just set that as false. And then for the created at date time, we're going to default that to now. So we'll say at default now. Perfect. So this file does two things. First, it defines our database table structure here, and then it defines the types Prisma will generate. So Prisma is schema first. You define your models, and then Prisma will generate the SQL migrations, type safe client, and query methods for us. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to save it. And then we're going to jump back over into the terminal, and we're going to apply this schema to our database. So back over here in the terminal, we'll go ahead and clear this, and we're going to run bunx prisma migrate dev name init. Okay, so what that did for us is it created a dev DB. It's going to create our migration files. It generates the Prisma client. And after this step, our project now has a few more files. So let's jump back into VS Code and see what it did for us. Okay, so we're back here in VS Code. We'll close this. We'll open up our file. And you can see it created our dev DB. We have our migrations, and inside of our node modules, we have our new Prisma client. Perfect, that's what we want. So at this point, we have a real database, we have a generated type safe query client, and that's gonna set us up perfect for the next step. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add some structure to our backend. So the very first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna come here into backend, and in the root of this folder, we're gonna create a directory called source, src. And then inside of there, we're going to create a folder, or excuse me, a file called db.ts. And let's start building this out now. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to import the Prisma client. And this is going to come from Prisma client. And then right below that, what we're going to do is we're going to export a const Prisma, and that's going to equal new Prisma client. And that is all we need to do for the db.ts file. Save that. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up our to-do routes. So we're going to come back over here, and inside of our source, we're going to create a directory called routes. And then inside of here, we're going to create one called todo.ts. We'll close that, and we'll start building this out. Okay, so first things first, let's import the Prisma client that we just created. So we're going to say Prisma, and this is going to come from the DB. Okay. Then what we're going to do is going to export a sync function. We'll call this handle to-dos. And then we'll pass the request. And then in here, what we're going to do is we're going to set a const URL equals new URL. And this is going to be the request URL. And then right below that, what we're going to do is run our first method. We're going to say if the request method is equal to get and URL.pathname is equal to /todos, we're going to run something. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set a const for todos, and we're going to say await since this is an async function, and then we're just going to run prisma.todo.findMany. And this is a really cool thing about Prisma is that find many function is built in based on the schema that we generated. So that's super cool. And then right below that, what we're going to do is just return the response.json of those to-dos that we find. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to do another one. We're going to say if the request method is equal to a post and the URL path name is equal to /todos. First, what we're going to do is we're going to set our body const, and we're going to say equals await request JSON. And then after that, we're going to say as, we're going to say title. We'll make this optional, string. And then right below that is where we're going to start doing our checks. So we're going to say first, if there is no body title, what we're going to do is we're going to return a new response. And this response is going to say simply title is required, right? Just some very basic validation. And then we'll set the status to 400. Perfect. All right, and then below that, what we're going to do is we're going to set a const to do, and we're going to say await, and then we're going to say prisma.todo create. Again, another helpful Prisma function. And then in here, we're basically going to just say data is going to be equal to the title of the body title that we pass as a payload. Okay, and then right below that, what we're going to do is we're just going to return the response.json, and we're going to pull that data, to do, not data. Perfect. And then once that's all good, what we're going to do is we're going to come out of here and we're just going to return null if all of that fails. Okay, so we'll go ahead and save that. That's all we need to do for our route. So React never touches Prisma. All the DB logic lives right here. We validate the input, and essentially we're just returning JSON. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and close this file. We're going to open up our backend, and in the root of source, we're going to create a new file. We're going to call this index.ts. And we're going to start kind of wiring up our entry point for our Bun server. So we're going to import handle to-dos. Those are going to come from our route. And then right below that, we're going to go const server equals bun.serve. And we'll start getting this set up for ourselves. So here we're going to set our port. Port's going to be 3001. Right below that, we're going to have an async fetch. We're going to pass request as a parameter. And then in here, first thing we're going to do is set up the const for our core headers. That way our backend can talk to our front end without any issues. And here what we're going to do is the first one is going to be access, control, allow, origin. And this is going to be set to all for right now. Then we're going to do another one called access, control, allow, methods. So the HTTP methods we want to allow. So we're going to do get, post, and options just for this tutorial. There are a few more, but we'll keep it simple. And then we're going to do access, control, allow, headers. And here, what we're going to do is we're going to pass content type. Perfect. And then what we're going to do right below that const is we're going to say if the request method is equal to options, then we are going to return a new response. And this is going to be null for the first parameter, and the second one's going to be headers, cores, headers. And let's change the name here. So this is cores headers instead of core. Perfect. And then right below this, what we're going to do is we're going to go const response equals await. This is going to be handle to-dos. Don't worry about all these red squigglies. These will resolve themselves once we add the final return. And then right below that, we're going to do another check. We're going to say, so essentially if the response is valid, we're going to return a new response. And what we're going to pass here is the response.body. And then here's where we're going to define it. So we're going to say status is going to be response.status. And then right below that, we're going to have headers. And the headers are going to be equal. We'll do a spread operator on our cores headers. And then right below that, we're going to set the content type. And that's going to be equal to application/JSON. Perfect. And then what we're going to do is outside of this one, we're going to return new response. And this is going to be not found. And then we'll just set the status to 404. Okay. And then outside of all of this, we're going to just do a nice console log. And we'll say, we'll do the backticks, and we'll say backend running at HTTP localhost. And then we can add this variable in here, which is going to be our server port. Okay. And that is pretty much all we need to do there. Looks like we have a misname here, so I've handled to-dos. So I'm going to just change this name here. So I'm going to go back over here to our route. We'll just change our name to handle to-dos. Okay. Close that, come back over here, and now everything should be fixed. And that's all we need to do for essentially our Bun server. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to jump back over here into the terminal. We'll go ahead and clear this, and then we're going to run the following command to get it started and up and running. So we're going to say bun run, and we're going to go source index.ts. And now our backend is running. If you see this, there's no errors. It means you're all good. Now let's jump back over into the browser so we can test this endpoint. Okay, so what I'm going to do is open up a new tab. We're going to go localhost, and I'm going to go 3001, and we're going to test to-dos. And you should see just an empty array because we haven't added any data, so this is good. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need to do for the back end. And now what we're going to do is we're going to jump back into VS Code and we're going to start updating our front end here. Okay, we're back here in VS Code. I'm going to go ahead and close this. We'll collapse the backend folder, and we're going to open up the front end. We're going to go to source, and we're going to go to app.tsx. I'm going to literally just clear everything out. We're going to start with a fresh script. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to import some things from React. So we're going to import, we're going to use effect and use state for this, okay? And those are going to come from React. And then right below that, what we're going to do is we're going to set up our to-do type. So we're going to say type to-do equals. So the ID, this is going to be a number. The title will be a string. The completed will be a Boolean. And finally, the created at will be a string as well. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get our function set up. So we're going to say function app. And then I like to do this just kind of keep everything clean. At the very bottom, what we're going to do is we make sure we export default app. Okay. Okay, so coming back here into the root of our app function, first thing we're going to do is we are going to set up our use states for the to-dos. So we're going to say to-dos, and then we're going to say set to-dos, and these are going to be equal to use state, and then we're going to make sure that these are respecting our to-do type, which is expecting an array, and then what we'll do is we'll default that to just an empty array. Next thing we're going to do is const, and this is going to be for our title. So we're going to say title set title equals use state, again coming from the to-do type. And actually we don't even need to do it here, we can just pass in an empty string. Perfect. Okay, now what we're going to do right below that is we're going to run the use effect. So we're going to say use effect, and this is going to be an arrow function, and then inside of our arrow function, first thing we're going to do is we're going to set a const to the response equals await, and we're just going to run the fetch command. And we're going to pull from the local host 3001 / to-dos, okay? And let's make sure that okay, so what we're going to do right now is we're going to go use effect. It's going to be an arrow function, and then inside of here we're going to run a fetch. And it's going to do a fetch to localhost port 3001 / to-dos. And then right below that, we're going to do a then. I want you to take the response, make that JSON. And then right below that, we're going to do another then, and we're going to just say set to-dos. Perfect. And then there aren't any dependencies, so we can just leave a blank array there. And then right below that, we're going to set up our const add to-do. And this is going to be an async function, also an arrow function. And inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to set our response equal to await, since we're using async. And we're going to run our fetch command, http localhost port 3001 / to-dos. And then inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to set our method to post. And then we're going to set our headers to content type, and that's going to be application JSON, and that needs to be colon. Perfect. And then the last parameter we need here is the body, and that's going to be set to json.stringify, and then we're just going to pass in the title because that's, you know, what we're sending. Beautiful. All right, so we seem to be all good there. Let's make sure we add our commas. All right, and then right below that, what we're going to do is we're going to set another const, and this is going to be called new to do equals await dot response. Await, and then response dot JSON, and then we're going to set to dos, and this is going to be the previous arrow function. We're going to run a spread operator on the previous, and then we're going to go new to do. Perfect. And then right below there, we're going to set title to empty, So that kind of just clears everything out for us. So that's all we need to do for our add to do. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to actually render the UI. So we're going to keep this super simple, vanilla HTML and CSS, nothing crazy. So we're going to return, and inside of here, we're going to add a div. And on this div, what we're going to do is we're going to set a styling, and we'll just keep it simple. We'll just say padding is going to be equal to 20. And then inside of our markup here, the first thing we do, let's add an H1. We'll just call this to-dos. And then right below there, we're just going to add a very vanilla input. And inside of this input, first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the value. And this is going to be equal to title. And then below the value, we're going to have an on change. And this is going to be set to an arrow function. So we're going to say E. And then we're going to say set title. And this is going to be the e.target.value, which will pull the value of the input into it. And then right below that, we're just going to add a simple button. And this button will just say add. And then what we're going to do is on click, we're going to set this equal to the add to do method that we created above. Okay, perfect. Now we have our form. So what we're going to do is right below that button, we're going to add a list of the to-dos that we add. So we're going to say UL. And then inside of this UL, what we're going to do is we're going to map through our to-dos. So we're going to say to-dos, map. And then we're going to go to-do. It's going to be an arrow function, and then we're going to go open, close, parentheses. And then inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to loop through the LI. So the first thing we need to do is we need to set a key, and this key is going to be equal to the todo.id, okay? And then the actual value is going to be the title. So we're going to say todo.title. And that is pretty much all we need to do for the front end. So we're going to go ahead and save this. And then after we save, we're going to jump back over in the browser and see what changes. Okay, perfect. So you should see something like this. Again, don't overly judge the UI. This is not about creating the most beautiful looking app. This is just hopefully helping explain how all of these technologies work together. So we'll say finish tutorial, add it, and you see that gets added. And then I'll go explain tutorial, right? We'll just add a bunch of these. And then we'll say go eat some lunch, right? And if you refresh this page, you'll notice that every single time these are actually persisting, which is good. Now, if we go back over to our to-dos tab over here for our Bun server, and then we refresh this, now you'll see that we actually have data coming in. So they're all false by default, because that's how we set it. The names are in here, and then we have the proper timestamps. And if you really want to validate what this table is looking, you can use something called TablePlus. And you can find that simply by going to tableplus.com. It's free. You can download it for Mac. I believe they have it for other operating systems as well. But I already have mine downloaded, and I'll show you if you choose to use this. Maybe you have your own SQL previewer, but this is the one I'm going to be using. So we'll go ahead and open that up. And then once you have this opened up, you're going to click this little plus here, add, type in SQLite, double click. And then we'll have this screen. You can just name this. We'll say Prisma React Bun Dev. And then next you're going to select the file. So the file that we're going to select, we're going to open up the Prisma directory, and then in here you'll see the dev.db. So we'll click open, connect. And then here you can see our schema is already here, and it has our Prisma migration set as well. So if you click on to do, it'll show that we actually have those added to the database. So our front end is talking to Bun, Bun is talking to Prisma, and Prisma is actually updating our database. Super cool. Okay, so at this point we'll take a break. We didn't just install Prisma, right? So we learned Prisma is server side only. We learned that React talks to HTTP, not databases. Prisma is actually what generates the types from the schema that we set. And then the migrations evolve our database safely. SQLite is ideal for local first builds. That's why I use it. And this is just a nice, clean architectural, decoupling from our concerns here. Okay, so one nice little extra in case you didn't want to download TablePlus. This is actually built into Prisma, which is really nice, which is Prisma Studio. So if you're inside the root of your backend, you're going to run the following command. So we're going to say very simply bunx Prisma Studio. And what this will do is it'll open up a URL, port 5555, and it'll show you that you have to-dos. Click on those, and this is kind of like an in-browser schema viewer. Super helpful. You can add records here. You can modify the dates. It's just a nice way you can kind of see, you know, if we add another task, that will, when you refresh, that'll show up here in our database. Okay, that's a very kind of quick crash course on using React, Bun, Prisma, and SQLite. There's obviously a lot of other things you could do here to enhance this. You could go into Zod validations, you know, sharing types between the front end and the back end. We could use React Query, but that's outside of the scope of this particular tutorial. I hope this was helpful. And if you like videos like this, please drop a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.